Good evening. I can't leave this administration alone for 10 seconds for an afternoon. I go out, do some um do some work out in the yard, starting to prepare for this you know, big winter storm that's coming through. And no sooner do I get back to my computer to look into social media, then I find that Trump's ice goons have gone and killed somebody, another person. And before you start talking about how this is all the fault of the liberals, this guy was, it's like this guy was just intervening on behalf of a woman who was getting harassed by ICE. And their response was basically to tackle him, pepper spray him, and then shoot him dead after they took his gun, which is pretty much fundamentally murder. Because after you take that gun, what is he going to do? Sneeze at you? You have several men holding him down. Why would you need to kill him? But then that's not how these people think. They don't think like Americans. They don't think constitutionally. Instead, they think like tyrants think. They think in terms of if you resist, if you do not comply, you will die. It is rule through fear and violence. And it is fundamentally un American. Now, yes, before you ask, before you say anything, I'm going to tell you that, yes, authorities have used violence in this country. There is no perfect track record here. Never has been. But you know something? It's like it's like in math, like an asymptote in math, or a limit for certain kinds of mathematical equations. Where it's the curve is always tending towards a line, always tending towards it, even if it never reaches it. And that's the thing. It's an effortful thing, a difficult thing to be a good, true, law abiding American. It's not always easy to follow the law. It's not always easy to do what's right. But to be quite blunt, they don't want to. Their mindset, their mindset is about power. But even if it is about power, even if their mindset is about power, yeah, the truth of our system of government, the reason why it works and works better is because at a certain point, I mean, it's why haven't we seen this kind of, unrest chaos coming out of any previous administrations. And yet, it's there seems to be an unusual propensity towards violence, towards a decay of public order, towards lots and lots of Americans dying for no good reason or getting detained for no good reason. It all goes back to that sense that what matters is power. Here's the thing about running things by power: you can't turn your back. You have to keep people oppressed. If you don't keep people oppressed in a power based regime, then at some point they will there will be a point where people decide that they are sick of what you're doing. There will be a point at which your officers start getting greeted at the front doors with guns, or worse, with bullets. And I'm not saying this to advocate it. I'm saying that eventually you will see violence. Now that may be what the Trump administration wants as a pretext to go in with the army and restore order. Except, what will that gain? I mean, what? Why has M- Minnesota has an accent named after it? Minnesota nice. People of Minnesota are not renowned for their hostility and violence. They're not. It only seems to get, chaotic when a certain defective president is in charge. A president who does not seem to understand the basic job description, who just thinks of his position as being that of the nation's boss, that his role there is to basically rule over us all, to be a king in all but name. Thing about being a king, it is a hazardous profession. And I'm not saying that anybody should do anything to Donald Trump. I would prefer that he die in office, if he does, of natural causes. You know, I would prefer that there is a peaceful end to what he's been doing. But here's the thing: why is it so risky to be a king? Why is it so risky to be an emperor? Well, when you concentrate all that power into one person's hands, well, all the power, all the blame. If you make yourself a god and your playing of god ends up, causing things to crater, then the natural idea is, kink, 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 the blame will go your way. And this is part of what the framers wanted to avoid. If you look at the way they constructed things, at a basic level, they didn't want people to hold the power. They wanted positions to hold the power. you know, positions. Like you are elected to the presidency. You are president, and then you're not. That gets passed on to somebody else. You know, we've had dozens of attorney generals, many secretaries of state. We have senators, senator positions. We have positions on the Supreme Court. And if you'll notice, you're appointed to them, you are confirmed to them, you are elected to them, and then if you kick the bucket or resign or get defeated in an election, if your position is an elected position, the power passes on to somebody else. See, this is the thing. I think that people aren't grateful enough for, and that is that we have a system as government, a system of laws, a system of rules. And as such, it is more robust, more resilient than a system that depends on basing everything on one personality, one mortal person's life, a, one mortal man's ability to keep their faculties together as they age. I mean, um we recently had a longtime Democratic senator retire and be replaced simply because she was getting so old. She was kind of losing her faculties. And did the position suddenly erupt in some sort of bloodbath as people tried to get the office? Well, maybe in some dimly metaphorical sense, perhaps, but in a real sense, no. People don't need to murder each other over the presidency. They don't need to murder each other over a seat or to become mayor or governor of some state. People, this is one of the valuable things because the power is not vested so permanently and potently in one person. When that person is, you know, dis, when that person is, when they lose their ability to hold, to run that office. We don't have to wait until they die. We don't have to wait until an army comes along and forces them out. We don't have to be so freaking extreme in order to remedy the situation of having a bad leader. And that is valuable. That is part of why America has lasted in its current form with minimal, with relatively minimal, no, just one civil war and the same government otherwise has been in charge of The whole system for about 250 years, which, if you look at European history, if you look at Asian history, if you look at the history of every sort of government around the world for the last 250 years, you'll find that we're actually a rather resilient, robust, and long lasting government. Why is that? Because we're not, because the shifts of power back and forth are not so violent. They don't have to be violent. You don't have somebody stuck in there who won't get unstuck unless you use force and violence to lever them out of there. You don't have to take a crowbar to people in order to change the person in charge. You just go to an election. That's gift. And it's a gift that some people, unfortunately, are all too ungrateful for. All too ungrateful for all the things that make America America. Ungrateful for the gift that is due process. That is, folks, the fact that your life, your liberty, your pursuit of happiness, your property, that the basic principle of our government is that these things cannot be taken from you arbitrarily. They have to prove you guilty of a crime. They have to prove you guilty of a crime and then run you through that justice system in order to get you to a point where you are stuck in a jail, where you are dead in a graveyard. Again, these people are ungrateful for that. They're tempted by the sight of other supposedly more powerful forms of government where they can get somebody to just say that what they want goes. That, that if they don't like gay people or trans people being out and about, they can get this person to say, no, you can't be like that. And they want that to be how things are run. They want things to be, like, I want all the illegal aliens just to be purged out of the country. I just want them to be able to just take them, kick down the doors, da 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 da. And they don't get that by giving them that extreme, unlimited power, without due process, without, the Fourth Amendment getting in the way and all that. They are handing, see, here's the thing, the government, even one that was your ally starting out, it doesn't have to stay. It doesn't have to stay your ally. There's nothing requiring that. There's no law of nature that says that the government you were friendly on the way in is necessarily going to be the one that you're friendly with going forward. You could very well, having been a loyal citizen, this is something that often happened in the Soviet Union. It's, you'd have people who were perfectly loyal citizens, perfectly loyal to the state. They were all in. They were, they said, yay, communism. And did that earn them an ounce of gratitude or a modicum of protection? No, it did not. Because when you hand somebody that extreme amount of unchecked power, you might temporarily get what you want, but that will come at the price of making yourself vulnerable to whatever the government wants to do at the point where it decides you are an enemy of the state or that your life is a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. When you create a government that thinks in that way, that can act in that way, you are creating a government that can destroy you without a second thought. Now, any government can do that, but we've created a government here where there are normally limitations on that, where there are normally processes and rules that have to be followed. Now that we're kind of descending into this kind of barbarity, anything goes. The man who who was shot by ICE today, that man, he was he was like he was licensed to carry that weapon, and he did not draw that weapon. He never drew that weapon. The you know Noam and Trump and his people, they're all lying, saying that he drew on them, and in fact, that he tried to shoot them, and or that he had tons and tons of ammo. Do you see something wrong here? We have a Second Amendment, and as it is currently interpreted by the people who are who are the majority, you're supposed to be able to carry that gun, with why, you know, having gone through the training and everything, you're supposed to be able to carry that gun wherever. And yet, that seems to mean nothing to ICE these days. Nor does the fact that, oh, what did you have? You had a woman in your way. She had a car that was partially obstructing the road, partially, because somebody was able to drive past it. And then your people got out unprompted, without really needing to, got out of the vehicle, decided to surround this woman, and one of them decided to walk in front of her vehicle and take out a gun. What do you think that woman's going to do? Is the woman going to act rationally? Well, rationality is something that tends to go out the window when you pull a gun on somebody. So she turns all the way, and you can see this in his very own video, turns all the way to the other side, and he has to basically the hood, lean over the hood of the car in order to get the first shot. And as it turns out, that first shot did not kill her. No, no. Worse yet, he had to set to the side where he was now clear of the vehicle that was now driving off in another direction apart from him. He had to deliver the final shot, which was the third shot. He had to deliver that final shot from complete safety the third time and blow her brains out. Well, I know the popular images of these people as tough people, but goddamn, it was a young woman, unarmed, who is who did not take a golden opportunity. I mean, there was a point, if you watch the video, There was a point he went all the way across the front of the video. There was a point where he was dead center in front of the he was dead center in front of the vehicle. Now, if she wanted to kill him, if she was, this leftist radical aiming to murder him with her car, then that was the point. That was the point where he could kill her. I mean, she could kill him, run him right over, you know, plip, plip, leave him as a smear on the pavement. He could do that. And if this other guy wanted to be a danger to them, he could have drawn his weapon and shot at them, which he didn't. In fact, they took his weapon from him before they shot him. They took his weapon from him before they shot him. They took the weapon from a guy who was, actually within his rights to have that weapon. And they shot him dead after he no longer had the ability to fight back, to shoot them back. This is not the act of people of courage. This is the act of people who have no courage, not as we understand it. Because let's be blunt here. How much courage does it take a car full of armed men to stand up to a woman who is partially blocking the road? A mother with stuffed animals in the glove compartment. How much courage does it take for them to stand up to this oppression of, this interference? Oh, how dare she? Oh, she got in our way. She must die. Is this the is this the behavior of normal people? Of normal men who have a pair that they need to gang up on a woman in a road what for anybody else would be a road rage incident? And she wasn't even completely blocking the way. She was, you know, from evidence, just trying to get out of the way eventually. But they can't, they don't have this, they don't have that, they don't carry their power with confidence. They don't carry their power with patience, with mercy, with forgiveness. They carry their power as if even letting a little bit of that power be questioned would destroy everything. They have to they seem to have to assert their power all the time, every time. There's no there's no they don't have the ability to just sit back and keep control of themselves. And so these situations keep on blowing up. But then again, these people were never meant, really, if we're going by Trump's plan, these people were never meant to be folks who are in control of themselves. These people We're meant to be the arm of another man who is never really in control of himself, who feels the need to control others in order to feel like everything is right with the world. He has to win. He has to have everything his way, or else the world isn't right. See, that's the thing. They look at it as a game that they must win all the time, every time, or they're nothing. It doesn't occur to them to think of it in terms of an adult sort of cooperation sort of thing. It doesn't occur to them that, keeping together a society like ours, part of the robustness, part of the resilience of our democracy, our republic so far has been that there are limits to the power that the authorities can wield, and that authority comes from the people. That right to use, that ability to use force, that clearance to use force comes from the people. And you might say, oh, how does that work? I mean, wouldn't the people just let themselves do whatever they wanted? And yeah, there have been times when there has been that sort of permissiveness, and what happens is that generally people discover that that doesn't work too well. So people learn from experience and they create something a bit more moderate, a system that doesn't have to be constantly riding on every person in the country, that doesn't have to be showing force all the time, every time, doesn't have to have people marching in the street, to with riot gear and be throwing chemical, smoke grenades, you know tear gas all the time at people in order to give a sense of dominance. It's sort of a virtue signaling way of looking at government. Of, if you don't show your dominance all the time, then you're nothing. Then you're just a minor revolt away from being kicked out of power. And that's how they're thinking. But the thing about it is, and this is why over the course of history, monarchies, empires, dictatorships are so unstable because you that concentration of power has a certain sort of kinetic kind of tendency to fly apart. It's like it's like you've hypercharged the you know what can happen is, you get something like you get a Praetorian guard together. Oh my god. How many different Roman emperors were deposed by their own bodyguards? I mean, really, when you get a situation where or their own army. This is the problem. When you put such absolute power in your institutions, or you put such absolute power in one set of people, you get this kind of instability, because from time to time, like it's the army can't afford to have the population get too bent out of shape. It can't afford it can't afford for its own particular members to start getting, factional and everything. When you constitute the United States of America as an empire, you make it you make it vulnerable to this kind of violent overthrow, because guess what? It's, you're not going to be able to take Eisenhower's path. Eisenhower basically went into civilian life. Uh, just like George Washington. George Washington also did this. He went into civilian life. He got elected, served for a couple of terms, then went back out of back out into civilian life. And guess what? They they nobody had to kill them to get their hands off of power. They willingly relinquished it. And that's something that our friend, the defective president, doesn't know how to do. He doesn't know how to let go. He doesn't have that ability to willingly concede power. Instead he has to sell it to everybody that somehow he was wrong, that he was the real winner, but a conspiracy kicked him out. The deep state kicked him out. And while that's good for hoodwinking his followers, it tells you something about the guy. It tells you that he's weak. He's a weak man who does the trick that many weak men do, and that is presents himself as the strongest possible individual in a charismatic way that makes people think, oh, this guy's gonna bring all the good things back. But he could give a rat's ass about us. And that's part of the reason why he lost the first time. You know, why he got kicked out the first time. Because the guy just could not put himself second. And neither can the people who shot this guy, who shot that woman in Minnesota, who continue to detain and kidnap and take citizens and people who are in this country legally. This is the thing. I want people to start realizing this. Start realizing this about what ICE is doing. A lot of the people, a lot of the new recruits for ICE are being promised huge bonuses of tens of thousands of dollars, but they have to fill quotas. They have to fill quotas of arrests. So are they doing this the honest way by going out and doing the hard work necessary to catch actual undocumented workers and undocumented people and sending them back? Are they doing that? Not at all. This is another, sign of the weakness at the heart of this. These aren't people who actually know how to do the job. They're not actually doing the job that they were meant to do, that they were supposed to do. ICE agents these days aren't very good at actually getting people who are undocumented immigrants and lawfully arresting, detaining them, and deporting them. They seem to have to cut all the corners. You know, warrants? We don't need any warrants. moderation of force. No, we're just going to kick everybody's ass. Shoot them if they resist. Pepper spray them right in the face. The sadism is a mark of people who need to impose power to feel like they are safe and secure in that power. They don't have the courage to sit still, to be still, to wait, to do the right thing. They don't have the patience to go through the system and use the law itself as they are supposed to do as law enforcement officers. They're not willing to, put together that affidavit that says, okay, this is who I'm going after. This is why I'm going after this person. I suspect I have probable cause to believe that this person did this offense, and this is their address, or you know this, and I'm going to go and I'm going to actually convey them to some sort of normal place, not some, you know, overcrowded detention center. I mean, I tell you what, it's weakness. I know I keep on saying this, but it was weakness that allowed the Nazis to take over in Germany. Weakness. Because they'd lost the war. They'd, you know, very badly lost. They were crushed by the need to pay back reparations. They, their spirits were dashed, and then this guy comes along and says, "I can do this the easy way. I can present you the way back to glory." And that's an attractive offer, especially if you believed in the country leading up to it. But here's the thing: the people who offer you that kind of patriotic release aren't always patriots themselves, aren't always people who actually have the best interests of the country in mind. No, what they're doing is offering you power, so that unlimited power, so that you don't mind when they take unlimited power. But the thing is, when they take unlimited power, there's it's not so easy to take it back from them. This is the thing. And here's the thing: somebody like Donald Trump, he will appeal to the worst in you. He will appeal to the part of you that wants what you want. He has a sort of he is like the nation's inner toddler. You know, wants what he wants in terms of food, wants what he wants in terms of entertainment, wants what he wants in terms of women. Unfortunately, even if they don't want it themselves, wants what he wants in terms of getting Greenland and getting Canada and getting, you know, wants everything he does seems to orbit around trying to get whatever he wants, no matter how much chaos and disorder he has to inflict in order to do it. He looks at that power and he sees it as a means simply to get what he wants, whether or not he ought to have it. He looked at the power of the presidency to during the pandemic. He looked at that as being his way to set the conditions for his reelection. So he encouraged his own followers to disregard their own safety, to disregard masking. He encouraged a very hostile sort of approach to science. He encouraged people to believe in panaceas, cure-alls, you know, so that he would get credit for suggesting them. Ah, ivermectin does this. Yeah, da, 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 da. So on and so forth. It never occurred to him. He, I guess it's like he wasn't concerned with saving lives because to him, your life doesn't matter. Your freedom doesn't matter. Your ability to walk down the street without having to show a cop your ID in order to justify your freedom of movement. He doesn't care that that is an imposition on your rights. He doesn't care. This is the thing that kind of strikes me is that everybody wants to look at him as sort of a cartoonish sociopath like you see in the movies where they're just outrageous people who, you know, don't give a DGAF, don't give an F word. He he wants to project that as, he has this refuge in audacity. And it sounds like I'm admiring him when I say something like that. With audacity, audacity. Like he's outsized personality. Ba 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 ba. But there's a dark side to that. There's a dark truth to that. And the dark truth is this: he's not simply a jerk with a heart of gold. He's not simply somebody who does the right thing, you know, and does it by being an anti-hero, by beating up the bad guys, doing bad things to bad people. Although he often tries to portray his victims, the victims of his government, as having deserved what they got, the truth of the matter is that bears no relation to whether they actually ever deserved it, much less whether he had the lawful authority to do what he did. He does not see the conflict in taking the power over life and death that your government can have over you and misapplying it. He doesn't see the problem in that. He doesn't see that he has some sort of obligation to take care of anybody else. He is a toddler. He wants, and he doesn't care who he has to trample to get what he wants. And here's the thing I would tell you, folks in the MAGA universe: he doesn't give a ass about you. In the pandemic, tens of thousands of you were getting sick because you attended those rallies, and several hundred of you died because you attended those rallies, those super spreader events. He was willing to get you killed, to kill his own people in order to win. Now, that might sound like strength to you, but to me, that sounds like the failure to do the basic minimum that the framers would say that a person who leads a country like ours has to do. He doesn't know how to really do his job. His job is the here's the thing. The laws, the rules of our nation, they're not done by imperial decree. They're not done by executive order. The laws, the rules of this country are set by Congress. And it's supposed to be set by Congress because Congress represents you, not just in a sort of generalized way, but member by member, senator by senator. They're supposed to represent the parts of our nation of which you are a part. It's supposed to, you know, represent, our agreement, our consent as a people to be governed. And that's where the problem comes when you've got government by force, but government by fear and coercion is that yes, in a way you sort of get the consent of the governed, but you force that consent. You threaten them that if they don't, you know, let you govern them, let you do what you want, that you'll hurt them, you'll kill them, or you'll hurt somebody they love, or they'll be arrested and thrown in jail, even if there's no real charge, no real law broken. And there's another angle to this. ICE isn't doing its job. Its job is to find those who are undocumented, detain them, send them back to wherever they came from. But they're going and they're picking up all kinds of different people who are citizens, asylum seekers, um, folks who aren't undocumented. And so they're spending tons and tons of time going after everybody else. Maybe sometimes going after the undocumented, but much of the time not doing so. Much of the time going this way and that, picking up citizens, picking up green card holders, picking up this, that, and the other, or playing crowd control. And this is how they're bulking up, putting filler in their quota. So they're not doing their job in order to get their big bonus for doing their job. And that bonus is coming from us. That's our taxpayer dollars. They're going to these people for not only not doing their job, but so horrifically not doing their job that people are literally dying. That they're, going so far beyond the pale in their job, in how they're screwing up that job, that it's like they don't have the strength of character, of intellect, of integrity to do the job the way it is supposed to be done. Instead, they are taking an approach that basically says, I'm going to do what benefits me. I'm going to do what makes me feel powerful. What this does, and I'm not going to worry about actually doing all the difficult things that I would have to do if I wanted to act like a real law enforcement professional. These people, they're not showing strength. They're not doing things more strongly. They're doing things in such a way that I'm betting you for a generation to come, even if today they have great power, I says great power, it or its successor agency in Minnesota will likely have a much tougher time going for decades to come because of the bad memories of these times. And that's the thing. When you basically build up your law enforcement, your government system on treating the people or a certain section of the people as enemies of the state, as enemies to order, as violent people who need to be suppressed, and so on and so forth. You the things that you do in response to that ultimately end up being, generating a big swell of ill will towards you, a big swell of desire not to cooperate or to do what they might call malicious compliance, where you do the letter of the law of what they want you to do, but you're really just sabotaging them at every angle. And that's going to be what comes to pass. And you can think about it in certain terms as them basically making Minnesota harder for the federal government to govern, making that relationship much more fractious. I know a lot of there's a lot of people who are brainwashed into this idea that it's somehow appropriate to play favorites with the states or to attack states that you don't like. Um, Let me remind folks of something. Of all the things you can do, there are only two things that the Constitution says constitute treason. The first is to give aid and comfort to the enemy, and the second is to make war upon the United States. To turn our nation's armed forces on the people of a state simply because they're protesting, simply because they're groaning under the tyranny of your incompetent, barbaric federal enforcers, to make war upon them in that way is treasonous. But then again, this is the guy who sold us out. I mean, really. It's the reason why they had to scuttle that investigation rather than trying to fight the case in a court of law. Because here's the basic truth about that documents case. What do you think happened? Guy goes out of office, has his people deliberately take box after box of classified information out of the White House skips and takes them home to Mar-a-Lago, where they absolutely do not belong and never should be taken. because Mar-a-Lago isn't a secure location. It's not a secure, compartmentalized, information facility, which is what SCIF stands for. It's not built so that you can have classified files there and have them safe from being snooped on by our enemies. So at the very least, Trump, for what if Trump just got them because he wanted souvenirs, because he saw them as his personal files, then nonetheless, by doing so deliberately, he endangered the national security of this country. And that's what people should face, is that even if he had the best of intentions, he did not have the most secure um, facility to house the documents he got with the best of intentions. But let's not suppose that he had the best of intentions, because from the very start, you're talking about something that you ought not to be doing. So what? Did he declassify him on the way out? That doesn't necessarily make things any better, because you can declassify the knock list, the list of people who are non-official cover agents overseas. That there is. I don't know whether there's actually a centralized list of those people, but you could still have records for knock agents that if it got out, it would imperil an important source. It could burn an agent who might subsequently get killed. I mean, it's when people cultivate agents overseas, what they're doing is that they're actually persuading certain people in the native population, persuading those people to report to us on their country. And that of course is illegal in many countries, and if they get tattled on, if somebody accidentally or intentionally leaks their identity, well, guess what? Not only is there a potential for them to die, being executed by their host country or whatever, but it endangers our intelligence gathering. It endangers, you know, our ability to anticipate our enemies. And then there are nuclear secrets. Then there are, pardon me, secrets about how we construct our, like our nuclear reactors, and what kind of coating we have on the outside of our submarines, things like that. Things that it wouldn't do to have that would be radioactive to have out in the open, regardless of whether some idiot at the top had declassified them. Which is one of the reasons why there is an advisory panel on what can be declassified, you know, from our among our nation's secrets. So what we're really talking about here in terms of that is, even if he had the best of intentions, he deliberately took files that weren't. It's not even like a residue, like he was working from home and that there was a residue of files, a set of files that he'd accidentally kept, you know, in the collection among his normal files. No, he deliberately took these files, deliberately got them out. So what's the worst that could possibly be happening here? Well, the president's selling out our country. It's, selling our enemy our secrets, or delivering them as part of some bargain. you know? But we don't I know I've gotten off on a tangent here, but part of the point is, I mean, there's so many things that folks have rationalized in their heads, rationalized so they can continue to support this guy. And they've gotten to the point where they're rationalizing things, rationalizing uses of power that are so extreme that there is no redeemable reason for that use of power, for the allowing the person to have that power. What we're seeing in Minnesota is a use of power for selfish political ends, a use of power to beat up an, a typically blue state. And I've read a story recently that said that, you know, the peace offering that, the Department of Homeland Security is offering is, oh, let us look for your voting data. This They're trying to rig a game so that they always win it. They're trying to create a system where they can never be deprived of power, where they, no matter what mistakes they make, no matter what injustices they visit upon us, they can continue to lead. No matter how badly they fail to do their job, they want to be able to keep doing that job. And that's the thing. That's, I think, at the heart of why what happened in Minnesota is so bad. It represents a people being told, you know, it represents the boss, the real boss of this country, which is the American people, being told by their employees, you can't possibly fire us. You can't ever fire us. Because if you fire us, we'll just, violently take over the business. They're trying to make it to where even the worst of incompetence, even the worst of tyranny won't deprive them of their authority. Do you know something? And this is always going to be true. We outnumber these people. And if we say in a strong enough voice that things are unacceptable, even emperors, even kings, even the most tin potty of tin pot despots ultimately has to kneel to the people. If enough of us get angry, if enough of us take to the streets, if enough of us cry out, that's enough. And this isn't some fairy tale, this is reality. And you'll know this because if you look out throughout history, monarchs and other people always had to worry about their popularity, always had to worry about whether or not things were going well among the populace. Because if they didn't go well, well, that's when job security began to dwindle. If not because the people themselves would take over, but because at some point somebody charismatic looking to step up at the current inhabitants' expense, well, that person, you know, would exploit that anger. It's happened many times. In fact, it's a common feature that very often you'll have somebody like a Fulgencio Bautista, who's ruling by, with an iron hand, and somebody else takes advantage of the bad effects of that, Fidel Castro, and then uses that opportunity to rule with an iron hand. The attempted coup on Chavez, that didn't do wonders for, you know, that was an extra legal use of power by the Venezuelan right wingers. But ultimately, um, that rebounded. You got you strengthened the left wing leader to the point where they swept in as a dictator, basically. But it's like if you want a system that isn't apt to swing back and forth, that isn't apt to be so, where you can't just simply ignore, for the most part, what the government is doing. If you want a system that it constantly demands your attention, lest you run afoul of it and uh, lose your essential inalienable rights, well, that's where we're going towards. And that should be intolerable. And if you want a system, if you want our good old system to continue, you've got to start resisting and saying no now. It You've got to set a limit that Trump cannot cross. You've got to start ushering him out the door because he's the sort of person that won't stop themselves. Doesn't have the wisdom or the democratic republican spirit to stop himself. We will have to stop him, deny him the ability to do further harm. Hopefully through democratic constitutional methods, but who knows? Americans need to remind their leaders that they are public servants, that we are not the servants of our leaders, and that more of this kind of behavior will not be tolerated. Well, that's it for tonight. Y'all have a good y'all have a good night. Stay warm.